Credit default swaps essentially are contracts to offset or hedge risk. They were invented by banks in the mid-1990s as a way to offset risk in their lending portfolios. But as they are currently formulated, they can be used to hedge or offset any credit risk, including risks from collateralized debt obligations, as they're referred to. The ones that we're probably most familiar with from the news are the residential mortgage-backed securities. Basically, the way they work is a buyer pays a premium to the seller in exchange for the seller's promise to pay if a credit event occurs. And a credit event can be, anything affecting the credit of the underlying security. It could be a default on a loan. It could be a credit rating downgrade of the corporation that's issuing the security. Originally, the way that they were envisioned and the way that they operated is if a party, for example, owned a corporation's bond and was concerned that the corporation might default, the party could buy a credit default swap that would pay in the event of a default. As I said, they were originally used by commercial banks, but they quickly became popular with hedge funds and other speculators who were looking for ways to sort of really as a way to make money off of the misfortune or credit downgrades of other companies. And one of the key features of credit default swaps is that they can be bought and sold many times on each end of the transaction, so that the company that originally issues it is not necessarily the company that ends up having the obligation to pay in the event of a default. Similarly, the company that buys it is not necessarily the company that at the end of the day will collect on it if the default occurs. Which means, of course, that the buyer doesn't have to have an interest in the underlying security other than the credit default swap itself. In its general outlines, a credit default swap, in fact, sounds a lot like insurance for a very good reason, and it's basically what it is. I mean, if you've read about credit default swaps in the news and on the various articles that have been written about AIG, you'll see that it's very common to refer to credit default swaps as insurance, and as we'll talk a little bit later on, that has some implications for how you would go about regulating them. Now, if you turn to the slide number 8,